Hi everybody, happy Easter! Bye!
Mr. Chloe's protest, Chloe.
It's running.
Happy Easter!
All right. Today we're going to continue our talk about the people at the cross, and we are talking about the centurion today. Next week we will talk about Joseph of Arimathea, and then we will end with Peter, and we're supposed to end on Easter, so I don't know if I'm going to end on Easter or if I'm going to do an Easter devotional. I haven't thought about that yet. But we're going to continue with the role the centurion played in the crucifixion of Jesus. And I'm going to read from the book because I always like these little snippets that they do from their viewpoint. So the centurion. Never in his lifetime had the centurion seen anything like this. It had been dark for 3 hours. Torches were needed to light the area, despite the fact that it was only the 9th hour. Added to the strangeness was the manner in which Jesus died. At the instant in which he cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last, an earthquake shook the ground they were standing on. It was as if he had summoned it with his dying breath. But the thing that struck the centurion the most was the demeanor of his charge throughout his torturous death. This prisoner was different from the bloodthirsty criminals and rebellious slaves he had executed countless times before. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When his accuser spat, he did not spit back. When he suffered, he did not threaten. He kept entrusting himself to his Father, whom the centurion heard him petition several times while he was hanging on the cross. The centurion had the feeling that Jesus had the power to change his situation, but he chose not to. He was standing face to face with Jesus when he died. The impact of this filled the centurion with an overwhelming feeling of admiration, so much that he had to exclaim, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." And that is what we are talking about. That is his viewpoint. That is where we are at right now. So what is a centurion? A centurion, century means 100. So a centurion was in charge of an army of 100 men. So he had a pretty big responsibility. I mean, I'm in charge of 2 kids and it's pretty overwhelming sometimes. Could you imagine 100 men? So we have this centurion. The centurion's responsibilities were to drill their men, inspect their arms, inspect their food, inspect their clothing, and command them in the camp and in the field. So they were in total control, in total charge of these 100 men. A centurion was in charge, and it was a centurion that was in charge of the Jewish rulers' scheme to put Jesus to death. So it was a centurion's choice. It was his duty. He was in charge of this whole scheme from the get-go. So, on that Friday, this particular centurion, we don't know his name, but this one that we're talking about today was given orders to start the crucifixion duties. He was to start carrying it out, getting the ball rolling. And at this point in time, this centurion had no idea what was about to happen. Nothing. He did not know his life was about to change. He thought it was going to be a normal crucifixion. He thought it was just another person getting ready to die, what they do all the time. Crucifixions were not unusual back then. So these centurions were hard-hearted people. They had to be. They could not feel cruelty. They could not feel mercy. So they are trained to kill people. They are trained to carry out these acts of the crucifixion, and they could not have the mentality. They could not feel cruelty. They could not be merciful. Because if they were, then they couldn't fulfill their job. They killed because they were commanded to. They were told to. Being a centurion took a special kind of person. Kind of like I always thought when I was doing this devotional, I thought about the ones who work in nursing homes or assisted living. It takes a special kind of person to do that. It takes a special kind of person to be a social worker. It takes a special kind of person to be in those positions. It definitely took a special person to be a centurion. Most of us couldn't do it. I would say most of us have mercy. Most of us, I would assume, would not like beating a person and being cruel to the person to the point of death just because we were told to do it. I would hope we don't take pride, take comfort in that, but that's what makes us happy. The centurions were, I'm going to use my word, whitewashed, brainwashed, whatever we do, to have no feeling towards that at all. It was just a job. Because if they let their feelings factor in, they may take it easy or they may not fulfill the requirements, and they could not do that. So the centurions were very, very hard-hearted people. They had to be that way. But the centurions were only one example of people we know that had a hard heart in the Bible. There's numerous examples of people whose hearts were hard. Some Jesus turned, some Jesus didn't. I think of Pharaoh and the 10 plagues, 10 times. Pharaoh, the whole time, had a hard heart, but God still gave him a chance. God still gave the centurion a chance. God still gives us a chance. He allows us. He wants us to have a soft heart. He does not want us to be a hard-hearted Christian. So now we're going to talk about, we already talked about the centurion's job was to carry out the crucifixion duties. It's Friday morning. We're getting ready to crucify Jesus. We're getting things set up, and this is what the centurion had to do. They had to get the victim. They stripped him. They tied him to a post. Then they have his back beaten with a whip. And we know the whip had sharp metal, sharp objects, something very sharp on the back that wouldn't just hit you. It cut you. Every time it hit your skin, it cut you. That's not it. After this, Jesus was stripped a second time. And after he was stripped, they put a scarlet robe on him. This is the mockery. They put a scarlet robe. Then they put a twisted crown of thorns. They didn't just set it on their head. They pressed it into his head. While that crown of thorns is in his head, he was mocked. He was spit on and hit some more. That'd be enough, right? We still have 2 more things. They stripped Jesus again. They put different clothes on him and led him to Golgotha. Once they got there, he was stripped a 4th time. You were hung naked on a cross. Jesus was humiliated 4 times. Then he was nailed to the cross. And we all say nailed in our hands. The hands would rip. It was probably more in the forearm because you have all your weight pulling down. So it was probably more in this area, but he was nailed to the cross naked. Then, the centurion was part of this. The soldiers took the 5 pieces of clothing Jesus had and divided amongst themselves. He had sandals, a belt, an outer robe, a headpiece, and an undergarment. They took those 5 things and they divided 4 of them, and then they cast lots on the last garment. Then, so this is their duty. They got him ready. They beat him. They stripped him. They got him on the cross. They stripped him again. They took all of his clothes. Now, what's left to do? We sit and we wait. We wait for our victim to take their last breath. This was usually a long wait. Typically, the crucifixion takes about 36 hours. But we know from the Bible it only took 6. Jesus' crucifixion only took 6 hours. Again, 6 hours of horrible pain, torture, all this. The mockery didn't stop. The spitting didn't stop. The yelling didn't stop. The torture didn't stop. But 6 hours. You can believe this is a crucifixion that this centurion will never, ever forget. Why was it different? Okay, they beat everybody. They stripped everybody. They hung everybody naked. They may not have beat everybody as severely as they beat Jesus. They didn't put a crown of thorns on everybody. They probably didn't spit on everybody. I'm sure there was some mockery going on. They I won't say never. They probably didn't take anybody else's clothes or definitely argue over whose clothes they're going to get or cast lots to see whose clothes they were going to get. But where Jesus was different Jesus never told them to stop. He never resisted. He never complained. All the other crucifixions that this centurion has done, has witnessed, has been a part of the whole time that he's been centurion, he's never had someone not say stop. He's never not had a victim resist. And he's never not heard someone complain. 1 Peter 2:21-23 says, "For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly." Luke 23:34. This is what, instead of being told to stop, instead of resisting, instead of hearing complaining, the centurion heard Jesus say, and Luke 23:34 tells us this, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And they cast lots to divide his garments. The centurion had never heard words like this before. Remember, they're hard-hearted. They're all about cruelty, all about no mercy. They're not supposed to care. This is not the typical crucifixion. Jesus is not up there hollering and wailing and moaning and, "Please forgive me, I'll never do it again." He didn't do any of that. He didn't sit there. He hung there and he took it. And the words, when he finally uttered something, was, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He's got the centurion's attention now. The centurion is realizing, hey, there's something different about this guy. So the next thing, there's 3 events that happen. And again, the centurion stayed. The centurion was one. The centurion had to stay until Jesus took his last breath. He had to make sure that Jesus was dead, that his victim was dead. But 3 things happened that had never happened before. The first was darkness for 3 hours. Total darkness for 3 hours. Nobody but God can make it dark for 3 hours. The second thing was the veil of the temple being ripped. Only God could have done that. Third was an earthquake. Only God can make an earthquake happen. Once the centurion witnessed all the torture Jesus went through, all the stripping, all the brutality, everything he did, and Jesus never uttered a word, then he sees the centurion witnesses the darkness, the temple curtain being ripped, and the earthquake. He realized at this point, all these things the centurion witnessed, made him a changed man. And we have 4 things that made him a changed man. The first one, the centurion was now filled with awe. Matthew 27:54 says, when the centurion and those who were with him keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Again, we said this earlier, the centurion stood facing Jesus. Mark 15:39, and when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." He was filled with awe. He had never seen anything like this happen before. We start to see changes going on right now. The second thing the centurion did, he praised God. Luke 23:47. Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, "Certainly this man was innocent." He is innocent. That same verse, Luke 23:47, also tells us that the centurion believed that he was innocent, that they did kill an innocent man. He was not guilty. Again, how many times have they crucified somebody that wasn't guilty? Not very many, if at all. The fourth thing the centurion did, he made the good confession. And this was the most important thing. Matthew 27:54. The centurion saw Jesus was the Son of God. The confession was and is powerful. Same thing we just read up here. The confession, truly this man was the Son of God. He made the confession. that yes, Jesus was the Son of God. We make the same confession when we are baptized today, and it's not meant to be taken lightly. Now, we do not know if the centurion ever became baptized. We don't know anything about that. But for him to make the statement, truly this man was a son of God, is a life changer for him, a game changer, because is he supposed to care? Is he supposed to have somewhat of a soft heart towards people? No. He's not supposed to have mercy. He's not supposed to care. Yet, we see here these events. He realizes something's up. Something's different. And he made the biggest confession that we will make in our life, saying that this man was a son of God. The centurion is a great example of no matter how hard your heart is or how hard your heart gets, that God can still use you and wants you to be a Christian. We do not know if this centurion ever became a Christian, but we do know his life was changed by the statements that he made. Are you like the centurion and need a change in your life? That is where we're going to stop. And like I said, next week we're going to talk about Joseph of Arimathea. And we will see his role in the crucifixion. And that's all I have. So you all have a great week. And I will see you all here next week.